Welcome everybody, and a special welcome to people who've come as citizens to observe and in some cases participate. So you're very welcome, all of you. A couple of practical issues to highlight. There is no fire drill planned, so if there is a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion as guided by the very able and well-trained staff. People with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the left-hand side as you leave the chamber near the balustrade. Assistance will be provided for you there. Toilets are at the far ends of the corridors, either side of the chamber. Ladies to the left as you leave, gents to the right. Apologies have been received from councillors Project Colton, Button, Carlo, Everset, Erin Fulton McAllister, and Vaughan Thomas and Vivian Thomas. Just a few announcements I would like to make. Busy weekend, some really important things. First on the Friday was Holocaust Memorial Day, which we celebrated in St. Peter Mancroft. And had some wonderful talks. The rabbi gave a talk on the theme, which is ordinary people, and he made reference to the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, which I'm sure most of you have not heard, certainly heard the title of her book, The Banality of Evil. And that was the theme very much of that book when she looked at the Eichmann trials. After that, we went to the forum where there was a fascinating display für das Kind about the kinder transport and what they were allowed to take and what they couldn't. They were given one suitcase. And the choices that they made, this was a fascinating idea. If you have got a chance, please go and see. And it was opened by Waltraud Denhardt Herzog, who is the director of the Austrian Cultural Forum. She gave a very moving speech opening it. Saturday saw the installation of the new dean at Norwich Cathedral, Andrew Craddock. And the city was well represented. It's one of those occasions where the city, as it does, shows itself really proudly. And it was great to see some of the councillors there. And that's an important event in the year because, of course, one of the things that certainly I found as Lord Mayor in my year is the amount of volunteering and the amount of volunteers who actually come from faith-based ethics. So that was really useful. Yesterday, on Sunday, one last thing, I went to a service commemorating the Great Yarmouth floods in 1953, where 100 people lost their lives in the county from those floods. And I mention it principally because at the time they said these events may happen once in 1,000 years. And at that time they reckoned that sea levels rise perhaps 1 metre a year. Now it has quintupled. So it's something that is a reminder, a present reminder of the effects of climate change. I'm now going to item 2, declarations of interest. And just ask the... Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had a few general queries in relation to motion 9E on the agenda, and I'd like to thank councillors that have raised this just for their diligence in doing so. So motion 9E relates to suggestions around the rental market and calling on government to take action in relation to it. Many members in the room are renters of properties of various types, and some might be landlords as well. The motion is calling on the government. It's not specific to particular groups in a very narrow sense. It's quite a general motion that it's calling upon. And because I don't consider that any councillors would be more or less affected than any others that might be part of the rental market, I wouldn't consider that there's a specific need to declare an interest on that item.
Thank you. Right, item 3, questions from the public. What? Oh, yes, yeah. Declaration.
Thank you. Could I declare an interest on items 9B and D, please?
Noted. Thank you, Councillor O'Glan. Questions from the public. There are 4 questions, and the first is from Mr. Liam Calvert. Mr. Calvert, would you like to ask your question?
I follow the saga of the council's lack of action on fly tipping. It's frustrating that fly tipping makes local neighbourhoods so untidy and increases the likelihood of other antisocial behaviour. It's even more frustrating that fly tipping is more likely in areas with a high percentage of council tenants who are much more likely to have communal bins which attract fly tipping. A while ago, the council vowed to do something, and I followed one of the last cabinet meetings with interest. Actions to address fly tipping hotspots were discussed. I noted that the Cabinet agreed to publish a clear timetable for the commencement of these actions, such as CCTV and more enforcement, and the refresher of the corporate plan so that the Council could be held to account on its promises to tackle fly tipping. Could you please let me know how and when this timetable will be made available to members of the public?
Councillor Oliver, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Mr Calvert for your question, and good to hear from you again as a member of the public, and long may that continue. Fly tipping continues to be a significant issue for the council. Yes, that's right in our communities, and the Scrutiny Committee carried out an extensive review of the council's arrangements for dealing with this problem. This was during 2021 and 22. And on the 16th of November 2022, Cabinet agreed to 11 recommendations from the committee. It also noted the Council's successful bid to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for a programme of neighbourhood improvements. 0.341 million in capital and revenue funding has been awarded to provide a programme of neighbourhood clean-ups in appropriate areas. Finally, Cabinet agreed that a timeline is set to an action plan, with key performance indicators being considered at the annual refresh of the corporate plan. The action plan is currently being developed and will be completed by 28th February 2023. This will allow it to be incorporated into the refreshed corporate plan, which is scheduled for completion in early summer of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Mr Calvert, you are allowed a supplementary question. If you have one, I guess you do, you've got a minute in which to put it.
Thank you for your response, Councillor, and I appreciate your work and hope it doesn't burden you too much longer. A neighbour of mine recently recorded evidence, preemptively recorded evidence of fly tipping. She thought that items in a private dwelling might be fly tipped. She recorded such evidence and then, a few days later, found it publicly fly tipped on the road. Given that the council has a poor enforcement record, what chances does she and people like her have of seeing those perpetrators prosecuted?
Thank you, Mr Calvert. Would you like to reply?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Calvert. It's no burden, pure pleasure. Yes, I would say, please would you let me know and give me the details so I can follow that up. We're in the early stages of the Love Norwich campaign, always room for improvement, and the emphasis is on education, but where you have a clear cause and effect like that, so I think that all of us have got a duty to report that in, so if that hasn't already been reported on our website, then please do so, and if it has and things haven't been followed up as yet, please could you forward it for my attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. The next question is from Mr Chris Mardell on behalf of Norfolk Contemporary Art Society. Mr Mardell, would you please ask your question?
Thank you. Can you please tell me to what extent you worked with the Hay Hill designers and architects to include a design option which would incorporate the barrier homage to Thomas Brown, the sculptures as part of the new development of Hay Hill, and how you evaluated the unique cultural, historic and artistic contribution and potential tourist and educational asset that would be lost should they be moved to somewhere less relevant and visible.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, could you please give your reply?
Mr. Mardell, welcome, and thank you very much for your question. And to contextualise this, of course, the proposals for Hay Hill relates to the successful Towns deal bid we were able to get, and an opportunity to improve the public realm in the city centre. So let me give you a bit of background. So an initial site assessment by the design team highlighted a number of issues which the public realm scheme needed to solve to make the space function better. And this was informed by an equality impact assessment that highlighted the poor performance of the space, especially in terms of access for people with disabilities. The significant level of changes across the site and numerous mature trees were constraints in the design process. So this initial assessment led to the design team to conclude that the retention of the sculptures on Hay Hill in their original format was not compatible with improving the accessibility of the space. An alternative layout of the pieces within Hay Hill was considered at this stage, but the team wanted to retain the symbolic configuration of the pieces that was part of the sculpture's design intent, and they would continue to present obstacles to movement and events because of their number and size in the busy setting of Hay Hill. To test these findings, our team conducted a public consultation which received over 400 responses. They asked people if they agreed or disagreed with the proposal to relocate the sculptures off-site. 60% agreed that the sculptures should be relocated, 20% of respondents disagreed and 20% responded neutrally. Free text feedback offered a strong message that the current positioning of the sculptures frustrated movement through the space and that they could be better appreciated in another location. The team therefore developed the design for Hay Hill without the pieces. The council is seeking a new and suitable home for the pieces because we recognise their cultural, historic and artistic value and their potential as tourist and educational assets. I'm confident that the new location for these important sculptures will actually better celebrate their artistic merits that current or redesigned Hay Hill ever could.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Mr. Mardell, you are allowed a supplementary question, and if you do, I suspect you do want to ask one, you've got a minute in which to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, Councillor Waters. Can we be assured that the public and organisations such as North Contemporary Art Society and Sir Thomas Brown Society will be kept informed, included and involved in the decisions regarding the new siting of the sculptures, and that there will be good promotion of their whereabouts and good local information about them and their association with Sir Thomas Brown should the decision be made to move them?
Thank you, Mr. Mardell. Councillor Waters, would you please give your reply?
I'm very happy to respond to that supplementary question and perhaps provide a little bit more information. So one of the ideas was to move the location of the stones to the Elm Hill Gardens. There were objections to that from local residents, and there has been some correspondence as well with the police. So this has given us pause for thought in terms of what the best location for the sculptures should be, and we need more time to discuss these concerns as well as taking another look at other candidate sites with stakeholders. I am certain that the Norfolk Contemporary Art Society will be included in these discussions. The planning application, therefore, is being changed so that permission is only sought for the removal of the sculptures from Hay Hill at this stage. This will allow the delivery of the Hay Hill scheme, some £3.5 million of investment through the Towns Deal Fund, to work to the quickest timetable. And we would intend to submit a separate planning application for installation in a new location in due course. So what that means is we can get the benefit of a contribution from interested stakeholders to think about how we can locate stones and the statue of Sir Thomas in appropriate place, which we hope will gather consensual support after creative discussion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. The third question is from Mr. Jasper Haywood. Mr. Haywood, would you please ask your question?
An estimated £15 billion has been cut from council budgets by the government since 2010, and the government handed back just £2.8 billion with the Levelling Up Fund. Many communities in great need, such as Norwich, have lost out in the recent round of funding, which was announced just a couple of weeks ago. The way the funding is distributed seems to many to be a bit like the Hunger Games, with communities pitted against one another, forced to compete in a contest where Whitehall ministers pick winners and losers. I'm concerned that Norwich again is out with two schemes that would have improved our city if approved. Living near Slough Park, the scheme to radically enhance the green space would have provided a fantastic boost to the community, which has many needs. Can the Cabinet Member for Sustainable and Inclusive Growth comment on his views regarding this?
Thank you for that question. Councillor Stoner, would you please give your reply?
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Haywood, for your question. An estimated the news last week that Norwich's two ambitious bids for levelling up funding were not successful was extremely disappointing. As the funding pot was apparently 5 times oversubscribed, no doubt many other areas also feel let down by a process that required the reinvestment of significant time and expense, with a very binary win-lose outcome. Regeneration and levelling up requires a far more sustained and collaborative approach, where transformational projects are developed and delivered in partnership with government and not selected by what feels like a lottery. The two Norwich bids that we put forward were well prepared and had the support of the local members of Parliament and a wide range of partners and stakeholders who also put in significant time, resource and had committed match funding. The projects in both bids would have had transformative impact on the communities of Norwich and its economic vitality. Notwithstanding the disappointing outcome of the bidding process, we've not given up on delivering these projects and are currently exploring possible options for delivery. Norwich remains committed to regeneration and levelling up for people, businesses and communities. We will continue to seek ways to attract funding and investment to deliver our shared city vision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoner. Mr. Haywood, you are allowed a supplementary question. I suspect you will take it, and you've got a minute in which to do so.
Thank you. I am pleased to hear that the Council hasn't given up on delivering these schemes, but it still sounds to me as though the allocation process hasn't been particularly fair or transparent. Would you care to comment further on this?
Councillor Stoner.
Yes, I would, thank you. And I'm sure those areas which were successful are very pleased, and we're very pleased for them, of course. However, the Levelling Up Fund is in chaos, beset by delays and allegations of favouritism. And despite the announcement, communities across the country are still paying a Tory premium for the last 13 years. This round of funding is behind schedule, and 15 months after the first round of allocations, just 5% of that money has actually been spent. Many communities in great need have lost out on the recent round of funding. The way this funding is distributed is, as you say, like the Hunger Games. Communities are pitted against one another, forced to compete in the contest, and Whitehall ministers pick winners and losers. Even with the latest funding announcement, nearly all places are still worse off. Of 151 local authority areas, only 8 have not experienced real terms cuts since 2018, even when the new Levelling Up funds are factored in. The £2 billion plus fund is shared between 111 communities across the UK as part of the second round of Levelling Up funding. But of the 80 successful bids in England, which include Rishi Sunak's constituency receiving £19 million of funding, only half are in the 100 most deprived areas of the country. Analysis suggests that of 151 local authority areas, only 8 have not experienced real-term cuts since 2018, even when levelling up funds, including those just announced, are factored in. The other 143 have still had real terms cuts to key services that sustain communities. You may be aware that during the Tory leadership contest in the summer, Rishi Sunak told Tories in Tunbridge Wells that as Chancellor, he tried to reverse the Treasury formulas, quote, that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, unquote, so that areas like theirs, i.e. Tunbridge Wells, could benefit. Disgraceful. It takes an extraordinary arrogance from the Tories to expect us to be grateful for a partial refund on the money they've systematically stripped out of our communities, which has decimated vital local services like childcare, buses and social care. The announcement also includes projects that have little to do with levelling up, such as £45 million, that's the 6th highest award, that's gone to improve the flow of traffic on the roads leading to Dover, which currently comes under the Operation Brock. A Public Accounts Committee report said the first round of levelling up funding was just gambling taxpayers' money on policies and programmes, little more than a slogan. The report said ministers retrofitted the criteria for winning bids, failed to evaluate the effects of grants that were awarded, and did not yet have a strong understanding of what delivers local growth. However, Labour has made it clear that when we're back in power, and hopefully that won't be too long now, we'll make sure communities don't have to go cap in hand to Whiteford Hall for small crumbs of their own money back to do what they know will work for them. We will give all people in all parts of Britain the tools, resources and backing to make their full contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. The last question is from Mr. Josh Worley. Mr. Worley, would you please ask your question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I read last month in the Norwich Evening News that this council was ordered to pay compensation to a tenant for not properly responding to reports of damp and mould, for poor communication and for blaming residents themselves for the problem. This came shortly after the regulator of social housing wrote to housing providers saying, and I quote, "We therefore expect you to have a comprehensive understanding of the extent of potential damp and mould issues in your homes and to be taking action to remedy them." There is no evidence that the council is proactively working to remedy mould issues in its properties, and I understand that the council is in fact failing to deal with reported cases. What action is the council now taking to proactively track down damp and mould in its properties and ensure that tenants are living in safe and healthy homes?
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Councillor House, would you please give your reply?
Thank you, Mr. Worley, for your question. Following the return of the Housing Maintenance Service to the Council's control in April 2022, work began to undertake a comprehensive stock condition survey, which will provide us with insight into all of the components of the building, including faults relating to damp and mould. With a stock of 14,000 properties, this will take a further 12 months to complete, at which point we can undertake planned investment works, which will aim to remedy structural issues which cause damp. In the meantime, we have a robust process for managing reports of damp and mould from tenants. There is a dedicated team of staff who are solely focused on this activity and who are able to diagnose faults and instruct appropriate works and provide advice where necessary.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Mr. Worley, you are allowed a supplementary. If you do, you've got a minute in which to make it.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your response. I would be interested to know how many cases of damp and mould the Council has proactively identified already since November 2022, please.
Councillor Harris, can you give a reply?
So, I'd like to just make the point that we know that damp issues can affect your quality of life, especially if you have health conditions or young children. And like most housing providers around the country, we have been reviewing our approach to damp and mould in council homes in response to a report by the Housing Ombudsman. As a Cabinet member for social housing, my main focus has been to get the strategic the strategy in place to deal with this problem. and we've already made a significant improvements to our procedures. As I mentioned, we are really very focused on this now, so we are taking this very seriously. I cannot give you the numbers because I've been concentrating on the strategy, but I can ask my housing manager to provide that. So you wanted the numbers from November 22, what we've been identifying proactively. Yes, I'll get that sorted for you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Those are all the questions from the public. For those of you who are old hands, you know I offer you the opportunity to sit for the rest of the council meeting, but there is no compunction to do so. You may go if you wish. Petitions, there are no petitions. So we come to item 4 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which was held in November 2022. And I call upon Councillor Waters to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of November 2022.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, formally moved.
And I call upon Councillor Galvin to second those minutes.
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the vote. All those against accepting the minutes? All those who wish to abstain? All those who are in favour of accepting the minutes? Thank you very much. I think that is passed. So we come to item 5, questions to Cabinet members. We have a full and varied set. For the sake of business this evening, I ask you, please, when you come to give us supplementaries, please ask supplementaries, but make sure you're asking a question and not giving a speech. And that's intended for everybody. So, question 1 from Councillor Matthew Fulton McAllister. We've got your answer. Do you see a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. So I just wanted to thank Councillor Harris for her answer, first of all. Obviously, as you may well have expected, some residents may have had concerns about providing such support within a community-based setting. And I just wanted to let her know that obviously their initial fears were misplaced. However, it would be incredibly helpful if she could explain to any other residents who may have concerns why those were misplaced and what the council has successfully done to provide support to those that need it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Councillor McAllister, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Matthew. As you said, there were some residents who were slightly concerned about this activity taking place in their ward. But as the work progressed, the residents felt very comfortable with the amount of supervision that was happening and the people, how hard the people were working. And in fact, I understand that often they provided lunches for them, so that sort of, they certainly bonded. And I think there's been instances where work has been ongoing and some perhaps tidying gardens up, and some residents have said no, they didn't want any help. But then when they saw the standard of the work that was being undertaken, they felt able to come along and say, actually, I wouldn't mind some help, and they became engaged with it. So it's a win-win situation. And I'm just really pleased because this is happening right across the city. I know it's happened in your ward, it's happened in Brook Place, Regina Road, Northfields, Nelson Road, Magdalen Close is the one they're working on at the moment. And having seen the photographs of the work that's been ongoing there, I'm really, really impressed. So we're working really hard with the probation service, we've got a good relationship, and there will be more projects happening in the near future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Councillor Huntley, do you have a supplementary question to your question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your reply, Councillor Harris. The regeneration of the King's Arms site crystallises local government solving people's problems in a time when the private sector has failed. A private developer left the community contending with an eyesore with this Labour-led council compulsorily purchased the land for new homes, giving people security and tenure. Viewing this as a template, can you commit to pushing this model forward to unlock other stalled sites and give more people homes into the future?
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. On the site visit just before Christmas, I had the pleasure of talking to some of these new tenants, and their homes have made a really positive difference to their quality of life. It was actually wonderful to see one family who were stuck amongst all the packing cases, but they'd actually managed to track down a Christmas tree, and that was proudly on display. So it was their home, so that was really good. The development came about after the compulsory purchase of the long-term derelict site. It's now put down a marker to developers sitting on stalled sites that this is a council that will take action. The use of the town's deal revolving fund will enable us to progress other stalled sites within the city through the compulsory purchase route. However, one must be aware that the compulsory purchase route is a long, slow and very rigorous process. But we know how to do it, and we will certainly not shy away from undertaking it in the future. And as you'll probably be aware, in Cabinet very recently we put forward the 2 further sites were put forward for consideration. So we'd all rather see homes on these derelict sites than developers just sitting on them to try and make a profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Question 3 from Councillor Mike Sands. Councillor Mike Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I do. I'd like to thank Councillor Waters for his carefully considered answer, which was very detailed. Councillor Waters, I've had the pleasure of meeting Ukrainian refugees in my ward and in our city, who have spoken very positively about the vital support, advice and care this council has given them during their absolute time of need. It is unfortunate that the Conservative government cannot commit further funding to the scheme after next year, potentially leaving refugees at this council exposed. Can you comment further on this risk? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that very thoughtful supplementary question. The conflict in Ukraine is not going to end soon. It is going to be a long conflict. And so our Ukrainian guests may well be in Norwich for longer than the timescale in which government is currently prepared to fund the scheme. And they do need to step up to the plate on that. I think we've also recognised that the chronic housing shortage in the country, in the city, makes it challenging to find accommodation. Pleased to see there's a positive story from the work that's been done by the City Council and the County Council. But we must continue, as we have been doing, to press the government to provide assurance and certainty to a population of people whose lives have been dramatically disrupted and have been very uncertain, and they'll be worried about loved ones back in Ukraine. So the very least the government can do is provide certainty of our guests are with us and for the longer term.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. Question 4, Councillor Driver. Councillor Driver, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hampton, for your reply. As a council tenant and always lived within social housing, what we achieved at Golden Street represent a true example of the blissful citizens' socialism at its finest. Picking up the difference it made, I'm pleased to hear that you want to see more Golden Streets across Norwich in the years ahead. Before then, can you comment further on the steps the council can take to assist both tenants and residents with measures for improving energy efficiency and reduce their bill bills in this cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Councillor Driver. Councillor Hampton.
Thank you, Councillor Driver, for your question, and it's an important one. As my original answer indicates, we always strive to build our social homes to the highest
possible environmental standards, which negates the need to go back and retrofit these properties, but of course there are still thousands of homes across the city which weren't built to this standard, so they do need energy efficiency improvements. Retrofitting homes of all 10 years remains a big priority for us. And our approach to reducing fuel bills, keeping warm home and tackling fuel poverty is presented in our sustainable warmth strategy that was signed off by Cabinet towards the end of last year. And this was formerly the affordable warmth strategy in its previous iterations, but that updated name hopefully reflects a bit better that some of the measures, or a lot of the measures included within it and the corresponding action plan have both environmental and social benefits. So in this context, delivering energy efficiency improvements means less energy is needed to keep a home warm, resulting in lower bills and reduced carbon emissions. So I refer anyone to our strategy for a fuller picture than I can give in this answer. But in brief, as stated in that strategy, over the last 5 years, we've made energy efficiency improvements to over 1,800 properties to improve the affordability of warmth and the living conditions. And again, I think it's in my original answer, but we've recently announced £290 million of investment to improve energy efficiency in our social housing. And that's on a programme running up to 2050 with plans being made to start targeting and delivering this as soon as we can. And beyond retrofitting, we've helped more than 9,000 people switch to a reduced cost energy supply with our renewable switching scheme. And in 2019, we launched War Power, our own white label energy supplier providing affordable access to clean energy tariffs. To sum up our ambition on this, the Sustainable Warmth Strategy contains a new policy commitment statement which states our ultimate aim of eradicating fuel poverty in Norwich within the timescale of the Norwich 2040 city vision, and to continue to support those who are struggling in the meantime, of course. This is rightly an ambitious target. It's going to require working in partnership with local partners and, of course, ideally a significant amount of investment and support from government to achieve this and lift people out of fuel poverty as quickly as possible. So we continue to engage with the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership. We have retrofitting of homes as a key strategic priority, as well as the Norwich Climate Commission, which we launched in 2021 and has a strand of work looking at retrofit and built environment with its Our Power group running events and offering support to communities and community groups on how to decarbonise their homes or premises. And I won't go into it now because we've covered many times on this chain, and probably will again tonight, exactly what we need nationally to happen for us to go further and faster, but in a nutshell, that's a nationally led and funded but locally delivered retrofit strategy combined with measures to fix our broken energy system, including substantial investment in renewables and better regulation. So we'll be continuing to make those calls as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Question 5 from Councillor P. Councillor P, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord. Thank you, Councillor Oliver, for your reply. Flighting in Wexham Wall, like every other part of the city, is an ugly eyesore and a problem made worse by the higher fees and cost walls in 6 years ago by Victoria and Norfolk County Council. While the taxpayers of our city and my community pick up the fiscal and financial costs of this, can you tell me how the Love Norwich campaign seeks to encourage residents to do the right thing, but also act against those which do not?
Thank you very much, Councillor P. Councillor Oliver, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor P. Yes, as you've identified, the Love Norwich Play Your Part initiative tackles things from the issue from both sides. So we have education, we have encouragement, because we believe that most people will do the right thing given the opportunity, but we are limited by the fact that we work in partnership sometimes with local authorities who mood ideas such as potentially closing recycling centres one afternoon a week in order to cut costs to balance their budgets. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that fly tipping, etc., is an environmental crime and one for which our city picks up the tab, and that's not fair on us, it's not fair on our citizens. So we will be doing everything starting with education and providing opportunities for people to dispose of their used items appropriately, but we will be deploying CCTV where appropriate and taking enforcement action. So watch this space.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oliver. Question 6 from Councillor Padder. Councillor Padder, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Supplementary. Okay. So representing a ward which will benefit enormously from the East Norwich Master Plan regeneration and the potential for sustainable and inclusive growth, I sometimes meet constituents who ask me about a forward-looking Lakenham. What should I tell them?
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoller.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Padder. So East Norwich Regeneration will create a new self-sufficient quarter of the city right on the doorstep of your constituents in Lakenham. This will provide, first of all, access to up to 6,000 new jobs, which I'm sure will be extremely welcome. They'll also be able to access new community and social facilities, green spaces, the river and Whitlingham Country Park directly, because we are making a link between the city and Whitlingham Country Park. And they're going to be able to access some very beautiful places, particularly with some very old heritage buildings that we are retaining and intending to put into public use. So my view is that the regeneration of East Norwich will have a very positive knock-on effect for its neighbouring area of Lakenham, and that indeed the regeneration of that area will lead to, in many ways, a regeneration of the neighbouring areas.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoller. Question 7 from Councillor Kidman. Councillor Kidman, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Waters, for your reply. I know that the artwork behind us, the first in any local authority in Great Britain, will for all time be a permanent and important reminder for those of us who are elected that the social, economic and climate crisis our society faces is the greatest challenge. Can you comment on whether in the future more public art can be displayed across City Council facilities, and that the agenda to promote culture will always have its place within this organisation?
Thank you very much. Councillor Waters, would you like to reply?
Thank you very much for your supplementary question, Councillor Kidman. We are ambitious to have a city which exhibits, displays, enables people to embrace the cultural richness of the city. There are some very exciting things I know being planned at the Sainsbury Centre under its new director, Jago Cooper, and I've had meetings with him about cultural investment and ambition. There is a report which I'm launching in Parliament next week through the Key Cities Group, where I lead on the cultural portfolio, which is about cities in place, and I'll make sure that all members have copies of that report. What that demonstrates is, relative to our size, in that Key Cities Group of 27 cities, we have the highest level of cultural investment. And in terms of physical presence, there is the ambition to have a sculpture trail which will run from the city right up to the UA Sculpture Park. And one final point, the events that we run, the cultural activities we're engaged with, a piece of work done about European cities demonstrates that there is more democratic engagement with a council that makes that kind of investment. And that is good for democracy, and that's good for participation, and that's good for engagement between the citizens and its elected representatives. So yes, culture will always have a central place within this organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Can I raise a point of order, please, Lord Mayor?
Yes.
Can I ask how this mural is going to reach the public when it's kept behind closed doors?
I don't see that as actually a point of order. And apparently it's subject to a related question. Question 8. Councillor Stewart, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. And thank you, Councillor Giles, for your reassuring reply. The ferocious austerity programme devised by the Conservative and Liberal Democrat coalition government and mercilessly imposed on local authorities for nearly 13 years already will force this administration to seek yet more savings in next year's budget, potentially affecting vital services at a time when the need for these services has never been greater. For those who choose to deliberately misrepresent the financial reality that Norwich City Council and all of local government faces, please can you confirm that any revenues raised from a car parking charge is to be directed to the budget that supports facilities such as our award-winning parks, open spaces and other valued services, which this council is bound to deliver for its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Giles.
Yes, I can confirm that money raised from this income will help to continue protecting vital services. We are blessed in Norwich with beautiful parks and green spaces, 23 large parks, 81 play parks and 56 natural areas. However, after 13 years of huge Conservative government cuts to this council's core spending power, aided and abetted, I'm afraid, of course, by the Liberal Democrats for the first 5 years. Well, we were sighing, but it's true, unfortunately. Combined with the failure of this Tory government to control runaway inflation, we are left with a £6.2 million general fund revenue expenditure funding gap that we are needing to fill through tough but necessary decisions to balance the budget and continue to fund the maintenance of the parks and green spaces across the city we are so blessed with to a high standard. The parking charges for Eaton Park have been set at an affordable rate, £2 for up to 4 hours, and a reasonably priced season ticket option for regular users will be available. Those blue badge holders who need to access the park via car will of course continue to be exempt. Parking charges are not being rolled out beyond those destination parks which receive the highest level of investment. Lord Mayor, the fact is that if we didn't take this critical measure to raise income, we would have to make cuts to vital services elsewhere. The party opposite is heavily criticising this decision, but I'm not seeing what cuts to services they would make had they not made this decision. I would like to hear this from the party opposite.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giles. Question 9 from Councillor Sue Sands. Councillor Sue Sands, do you have a supplementary question? And if so, please go ahead.
Indeed I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Council Officer Elder, for your reply. Across January and before, we've seen some of the coldest days in over a decade. For our fellow citizens facing street homelessness, the support and assistance provided by this Council, working with partners, could mean the literal difference between life and death itself. Building on the SWEP arrangements, would you comment on numbers of people helped and some of the reasons why people fell into such desperate decisions in the first place?
Thank you very much, Councillor Sue Sands. Councillor Oldham, please reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sands. So you'll be aware that the verified rough sleep count, which we undertake every year, and it's in November of 2022, showed that we happily had the lowest figure of people on the streets for 7 years, and that's a very welcome 30% decrease. However, people are always going to, in the current circumstances, fall through the net and need help. And this could be for a number of reasons: the hostile environment, lack of funding for mental health services, no protection for private renters. So many things can form a perfect storm, and quite often it's not just one issue that causes people to fall through the net. So with regard to the SWEP, which is the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, this is when the temperature falls below a certain level, when it's below zero for a certain number of days, we activate the SWEP. but we already have provision in place from November to March. So when it's mild, it's there, but when it's cold, it's there as well. So we're not running around trying to contact people and encourage them to come in. They already know that we have that provision. The winter night shelter is only one of the facets of the offer. I've volunteered there a couple of times, and I'm pleased to say that it is a safety net, and there are people who come for a few days, even weeks, but there's also people that move on really quickly. So I'm glad we can catch them when we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Question 10 from Councillor Lovett. Councillor, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Firstly, can I say how extremely disappointed I was to hear that a delegated decision has been taken on this issue for the parking charges to go ahead, despite there being over 700 responses. This decision will have a negative impact on the elderly, the disabled, those on low income, and those with very young children. So much for this council's equality policies. Can you give me a breakdown of those 700 responses, those in favour and those against?
Thank you very much. Councillor Giles would like to reply.
As I set out, blue badge holders will of course be exempt from paying, so for the disabled and frail who need to access the park via car, you're shaking your head, it's true. If they have a blue badge, they of course won't need to pay. In relation to the breakdown of the consultation responses, I believe that both yourselves and university councillors have had meetings with the head of environment services.
It wasn't given. I was promised it's never done.
Sorry, well I will speak to the head of service and ask for that information.
And the business.
Can we have a reply from Councillor Giles to your supplementary question?
The car parking charges are set at an affordable rate to reflect the cost of living crisis, £2 for up to 4 hours. As I set out previously, if we don't take important measures like this to raise income, we have to make cuts to services elsewhere in the council, and unfortunately such cuts are not palatable, and unless you come up with alternatives to what you do instead, I would like to hear what those are.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Question next from Councillor Bogerline. Councillor Bogerline, do you have a supplementary question by any chance?
I do, thank you. So I've asked this question because it's an ongoing case, and Councillor Jones may know this because she's been copied into emails. I have pleaded with the council. I mean, I don't know what as a council I have to do more. I've been to the early help hub. I just really would like for the benefit team, the housing option team, and ideally someone who can give financial advice to sit together so we can find a way forward for this gentleman. And I mean, that's what I feel my role as a councillor is, that when I see there is a case, and I appreciate it's more complicated because it's not a council tenant, he lives in private accommodation. However, what else do I have to do other than plead with officers to please allow a face-to-face meeting when I feel that we don't find a way out if we just keep bouncing the case around from team to team with no resolution?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Waters, would you like to reply?
Pass the details on to me.
Question 12 is from Councillor Carlo. Unfortunately, she can't be here. So we move on to question 13 from Councillor Champion. Give me a chance. Councillor Champion, do you by any chance have a supplementary?
Yes, I do.
Thanks, go ahead.
So it's excellent that the council wants to be a leading council. I would argue that we should attempt to be exemplary, we should be world leading, we should be aiming to zero waste. Obviously, I appreciate that the recycling goes to county, and so if they put limitations on what we can recycle. But in your response, you referred to, for instance, East Anglia's Children's Hospice, and there's other organisations in Norwich which collect recycling for their charities, such as Hallswood Animal Sanctuary. I would suggest that maybe the council should get collaborating with these organisations and also communicate effectively. People don't know about the recycling. So the question is, how can the council communicate all the wonderful organisations in Norwich that do recycling so that we can help those organisations and aim towards zero waste?
Thank you very much, Councillor Champion. Councillor Oliver, would you like to reply?
Yes, I'll just say, having looked at our website recently, and if there's anything that you think that we should add to those suggestions, because on the relevant page we don't just talk about what we directly provide, we talk about what we suggest people can do with partners. I'd also want to mention the Benjamin Foundation that have the reuse facility over at Swanton Road, what was the old environment beyond it, basically. So yeah, plenty to be done, but if there's any particular areas that you think should be added to the website, let me know.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Question 14 from Councillor Price. Councillor Price, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thanks for the answer. It's excellent, and I'm sure Councillor Lambert would have made himself familiar with it now. My follow-up to you would be, what further activities does the Council have in the pipeline to help increase public engagement with climate change and to showcase its environmental strategies?
Thank you very much. Councillor Watson, would you like to?
Well, I have to say, in the context of Councillor Lumbick's earlier remarks, I'm particularly pleased to have received this question from you and provided you with an answer. Just to say that I think the opportunities for people to enjoy the mural, I've listed some of those already, but we do want to take the opportunity for members of the general public to come and see this as well. And I suppose what we have is a very strong track record of engagement around our environment strategy, the biodiversity strategy, the work that we're doing through the Climate Change Commission, which means there's a high level of both engagement and awareness of what we're doing, and we are well advised by the range of partners that we have working with us across this landscape. And I think all of us, as councillors, are playing our part in making sure that people are aware, engaged in all of these issues. But, you know, in the principle of 100 flowers blooming, suggestions are always welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moses. Question 15 from Councillor Young. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. It's great to hear we finally have focused action for what's been a long-standing problem blighting the personal home environment of many of our residents on an almost daily basis. Can you please let us know what are the outcome targets and success measures of the Love Norwich campaign? And will you be able to share this data with us so we're able to monitor its success?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, I will be able to provide data. I mean, much of the work is coming under the heading of pilot at the moment, so that will be evaluated on an ongoing basis. With regards to the particular area that you mentioned, I was interested to hear that possible use of garages would be welcomed by residents, so I would welcome the opportunity to discuss that further, because that sounds like something that is absolutely possible within the Love Norwich framework.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oliver. Question 16 from Councillor Hayes. Councillor Hayes, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you. So I think we can all agree that like-for-like replacement of how the council housing has been board is impossible. And the receipts will not cover replacing that house like-for-like. So I think there is a need for a supplementary question. Neither of us trust the current government to make any headway on this problem whatsoever, and I think the commitment to review right to buy doesn't go far enough by any means. So will you ask Labour to commit to end right to buy?
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
I think I did refer to the motion which is coming later in the agenda with 9E, when we actually want to abolish the right to buy. And I've said that I'll send a copy of that motion to Lisa Landy's office to see what we have passed at this, or hopefully passed at this council. So thank you for the question, but it was a bit misleading. It did mean we did need to make the phone call to see where we were, what was being said.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. The next question is from Councillor Oswald. Councillor Oswald, do you have a supplementary question? Right, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for your response. To a member of the public, it could seem that the civil exemption policy was introduced specifically for the benefit of Western Homes. And that impression would seem to be reinforced, given that Western Homes are the only developer to have indicated that they wish to apply for the civil exemption. Do you think that the policy is sound, given that no other developers seem to be interested in it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Oswald. Councillor Stoddart.
I don't accept a logic that just because so far the only developer to have indicated that they want to apply for it, just because they're the only one so far, doesn't logically follow that the policy was designed for them, as I think you know. So just be clear about that. And I think also, the policy is sound, and we would look at every case on an individual basis, on the basis of its own merits.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart. Next question, question 18, is Councillor Schmier. Supplementary, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart, for your answer. I know that you referred to the considerable policies and guidance in place to support appropriate decision making. Given that our development management policies were first adopted in 2014, and now we have two very large applications that we've already heard about in the pipeline at Anglia Square and also at Norwich East, do you consider that these policies and guidance that we've got in place is satisfactory to deal with the scale and level and number of applications coming before this council's planning committee, please?
Thank you very much. Councillor Schmier. Councillor Stoddart.
Scale, level and number, yeah, I'm a little bit perplexed, and clearly we've got, as you've acknowledged, we've got many robust policies in place. The capacity of the council to effectively consider proposals which come forward seems to me a slightly different question, so maybe I've misunderstood you. But I think the policies are robust, and I think our processes for dealing with them are robust. In very uncertain circumstances, as you know, there are going to be significant changes to planning regulations and all coming in the near future. So I'm not sure I properly understood the question, but I do think our capacity is a different issue from our policies.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart. Question 19 is from Councillor Gray. Councillor Gray, do you have any chance?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your reply. You say that once logs are returned, that an officer will examine them and determine what further action is required, if any. But there have been cases where residents have submitted noise logs and have been following them up for months, in one case 11 months, with no action being taken. Residents aren't even getting updates from officers, and in some cases have had to make formal complaints in order to get any response at all. So can you tell me what steps are being taken to get a grip on this service that to residents at least appears to be failing?
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Councillor Jones.
Thank you for your supplementary. I would sort of refer back again to the fact this is a service that is under review and restructure. We've lost significant numbers of staff through retirement and moving elsewhere, so there have been impacts on that, and it's not been at points as good as I would like it to be, if I'm honest, but we do have a clear plan forward. It got a little bit stalled in terms of restructure, that's going to be moving forward now, and I hope that we will have a responsive service, and I'm very keen to move forward in terms of how we monitor what experience people are having of that. I'm very keen to look at data around that I'll be able to keep track of as a cabinet member, but it is a work in progress, and I hope that your residents will be having a better response very shortly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Question 20, the last question because of time. Councillor Galvin, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. I do. Thank you, Councillor Waters, for your response. Based on the answer, I would expect that a monitoring and evaluation plan is in place, and I would like to see it, please.
Councillor Waters.
Okay, we'll see what we have, and I think that will come out in the forthcoming Equality, Diversity and Inclusion strategy. But I would just reinforce the point about the generational challenge in relation to reducing inequality. But one particular strand of work to identify how people are feeling about that is to ask them directly. And of course, the Community Connectors work has provided us with some valuable insights about things that people think will improve their lives, obstacles that they face. And we do have a government which recognises the paperwork to keep people in a very difficult position. And it's a piece of work that we did with the Good Economy Commission. What does a good economy look like for you? Does the economy work for you? What would you like to see? I think these are powerful personal narratives which help us shape policy and priorities to enable people to make progress with their lives and for us to allocate those resources. And the last thing I would say is, the cost of poverty are immense. And our understanding of what the cost of that is, I think, and that is quantified by, among others, the International Monetary Fund, the Resolution Foundation, is the allocation of that resource for a better system in a more positive direction will, I think, be the best way in which we can get to moving this embedded poverty and difficulties that people face in those retail areas. So I think there is a broad and interesting discussion, but let's have a look at equality, diversity and inclusion strategy and see if it provides you with the answers that you require.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. There were some additional questions, but we've got over time for the questions. There are, however, some written answers to those. We're moving now to item 6 on the agenda, which is the appointment of the Section 151 officer. Please note this item was contained in a supplementary agenda, so we've got that. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 6.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I've had the considerable pleasure of working with Neville Merton for the last few months. I found him to be a very courteous, very competent, and very effective finance officer. And if, with the permission of this council, it is agreed that he should be the new senior finance officer, Section 151 officer, I would look forward to working with him again in the future. So I very much hope that this council approves this report and agrees the appointment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Call upon Councillor Harris to second this item. Councillor Harris.
Formally second the item and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Invite the group spokespersons. Councillor Price, would you like to speak on behalf of the Greens?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It won't be long, but what I can say is that I've had the pleasure of working with Neville now for the time that he's been with the council, for the audit committee. He's proved himself to be an excellent officer, very open to questions and supporting councillors in their knowledge, and clearly has the skills and abilities to do this job. I think it's worth noting the outgoing Section 151 officer for the brilliant work in reforming how this council works, and I do endorse the appointment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak on behalf of the Deputies?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just largely echoing comments colleagues have already made, in particular about the outgoing Section 151 officer. Thank you her for her work at the council, but also my own personal experience with Neville for both the Audit Committee and the Treasury Management Committee, someone who stands up to scrutiny when asked challenging and difficult questions, and we get answers back, and very, very happy that he is someone who has already demonstrated a level of competence to be able to fulfil this role.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright, any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Nothing further to say.
Thank you very much. We'll move to a vote, and I think we will note also that those thanks for the previous Section 151 officer. So all those who are against the motion, please raise your hand. All those who wish to abstain, please raise your hand. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So that's a unanimous appointment. Thank you very much. Move to item 7, the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to move this?
Thank you once again, Lord Mayor. As this report sets out our current members' allowance scheme, expects that each year our allowances arise by the same increase applied to staff salaries. Given that this year the staff were awarded a lump sum salary rise in the local government pay review, it was quickly recognised that it would be an appropriate measure for councillors' allowances, so a different formula was required. I'm very grateful to members of the Independent Remuneration Panel, including 2 members from the County Council's Remuneration Panel, stepped in at short notice to assist us, and who have carefully considered the issue, as the report sets out, are recommending that councillors are given a 5.6% pay rise, in effect of the average pay rise that's been awarded to staff. But we must remember that the current rate of inflation is 10.5%. So, of course, in real terms, this is actually a pay cut. That is the same, of course, that our staff will be suffering, and also our constituents are suffering as well, thanks to this present government. I will say that all councillors across the political spectrum work incredibly hard to support their residents, whether it be attending meetings, taking phone calls, responding to emails, engaging on social media, talking to council officers, or relating with our colleagues at the county council over issues. The work of a council has never been more challenging than it is today. For many of us, it's almost a full-time job, albeit one that comes with incredibly antisocial hours and regular personal sacrifices. Shouldn't lose sight that nationally at each election, more and more councillors are standing down due to the demands and sometimes hostility that comes with our role. We need to demonstrate that we value each other and the work that we do. When I was first elected to a local authority in 1987, nearly all the members were elderly. They were the only people who could afford their pension to actually attend daytime meetings. I am very glad looking across this council, but also other councils, you have a much wider spread of ages, and that really is due to the allowance scheme. Now, I appreciate that I'm reaching the age of being an old crop. I used to see my colleagues in the old days, because indeed I should be claiming my pension, but I certainly wouldn't want to see a return to those old days where nearly all the members of the local authority were elderly. We need to ensure that the appropriate remuneration of councillors is done in the most appropriate way, and I believe that this is done by supporting the recommendations of this independent panel. So I very much hope that members will agree to this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Kinley, would you like to second the item?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kendrick, for your comprehensive and clear report, and I'd like to second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invite the group's spokespersons now. Councillor Galloway would like to speak on behalf of the group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the work that went into the report, Councillor Kendrick, and to the panel. A lot of work went on to get that fair proposal, because it was tricky, as you say, to make it fair in the current circumstances. We do support the proposal. Nobody becomes a councillor for the allowance. Some people are stopped from being councillor because of it. So I want to make the same point as you. There's no pension, no holiday, no benefits. The average age of councillors in 2018 is actually 59 years still, which is, considerably disbalanced to one end of the spectrum, shall we say. 15% were aged under 45, and 43% 65 or over. There's nothing wrong with people that are older being in here, I'd have to say. That figure has changed a little since 2004 apparently, so it remains the case that the proportion, or 96% who describe their ethnic background as white, and that's the figure that hasn't changed since 2004. So the proportion of ethnic minority councillors is lower than their share of the UK population as well, which is also linked to personal finance. In studies, personal finances are one of the barriers mentioned most often, with many seeing a lack of financial resources making it more difficult to stand. So we support this. This does have clear implications for diversity because there are income disparities in protected characteristic groups. But thanks for taking the time to come to what is a fair solution in difficult circumstances.
Thank you very much. Councillor Galvin. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak on behalf of the Lib Dem?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd also like to add my voice to thank the members of the panel that undertook this review on behalf of the Council. The proposal before us, a 5.6 increase, is the fairest I think that we can have available at the moment. And I think it's very important that under recommendation C that we're asking council officers to liaise with group leaders and members of the panel to look at whether a full review of the allowances should be undertaken prior to 2025. Having a full review and the ability to feed into that possibly allows us to take on board, or the panel to take on board, some of those comments like Councillor Gavin and Councillor Kendrick have already made in terms of making representation in this chamber representative of our community as a whole. But in terms of the report for us today, I hope to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Do any of the members wish to speak? No? Okay. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Nothing further to add.
Okay, we'll now move to vote. All those who are against this motion, raise your hand. All those who wish to abstain on this motion, please raise your hand. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So, unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 8, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review Report. Councillor Kendrick.
Yes, guess what? Me again, Lord Mayor. I'm sure everyone's delighted to hear this. This report provides details of the mid-year review of Treasury activities for the financial year ending in the 31st of March 2023. It highlights compliance with the Council's Treasury Management Strategy and policies which have previously been approved by this Council. The report asks the Council to note the Treasury Management activities undertaken in the first 6 months of this financial year, and this report is to be considered and agreed by this full Council. The report has been considered by the newly formed Treasury Management Committee on November the 14th, and it noted and endorsed the report for consideration at Cabinet and Council. The Council has adopted the new Separate Code of Practice for Treasury Management in the public sector and the Prudential Code of Capital Financing in local authorities, and operates its Treasury Management activities in compliance with these codes. Codes place responsibility on members to review and scrutinise Treasury Management policies and activities against prudential indicators. This report sets out a range of indicators and highlights that there are no breaches to alert you to. The Council remains significantly internally borrowed, and cash balances available for investment will continue to enable the Council to maximise its returns in a rising interest rate environment. As set out in the Treasury Management Strategy priorities for the investment of the Council's day-to-day cash balances are to safeguard security, ensure that liquidity is maintained, and then to achieve yield. Global financial markets have faced significant volatility as the government grasps and fails to deal with rising inflation and interest rates, low economic growth and potential recession. UK financial markets have been negatively impacted by recent fiscal policies and announcements resulting in sterling losses against other major currencies and the potential for high interest rates. The Council's Treasury Management activities continue to be monitored against this wider background in accordance with the linked asset services and the Council's Treasury Management Strategy. I am pleased that this report illustrates the positive management of our cash balances and endorse the recommendations proposed it's for approval by this full council. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Steely, you can second the item.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I formally second the item and reserve the right to speak, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price, would you like to speak on behalf of the Green Party?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This report reviews the Council's treasury management activity during the first 6 months of the financial year and reports on the prudential indicators. It places responsibility on all Council members to review and scrutinise treasury management policy and activities. Oversight and scrutiny of the Treasury Management Policy is now also supported by the newly formed Treasury Management Committee. This gap was identified by the Audit Committee, and I thank members of the Audit Committee for their work. I note in this report that the Council plans to make loan repayments in January and March of PWLB loans amounting to £51 million. The report goes on to say that a combination of early refinancing loans taken for the recent interest rate rises and relatively higher than anticipated levels of cash balances has achieved a reduction of the overall cost and the refinancing risk associated with the PWLB loan. That outcome is to be welcomed, but the question is, why are we holding high levels of cash balances? We don't want to end up in a situation where the Council actively underspends in order to lend money to banks and use the interest generated to protect services. Maybe the Cabinet member can confirm if this is now Council policy. There has been several new prudential codes introduced this year, with more to follow in the next cycle. The focus of the new code changes are to address the risks associated with commercial investments, including property acquisitions, known as debt-for-yield transactions. Norwich City Council currently has £183 million of investments and is directly impacted by the proposed code changes. Sigford stated position that authorities must not borrow to invest for the primary purpose of financial return. Tonight's report states that this clarification is not intended to require the forced sale of existing commercial investments, whether commercial properties or financial investments. However, it does go on to say that selling these investments and using the proceeds to net down debt does, however, reduce treasury risks and is therefore an option which should be kept under review, especially if new long-term borrowing is being considered. It will be interesting to see how the Council reconciles these changes in the next strategy, while also improving the existing asset portfolio and, more importantly, meeting local and national zero carbon targets. The Cabinet member will no doubt say, what services would Greens cut without the income received from these weighty investments? And the answer to him is that the Green administration would have invested much more in transitioning the local Norwich economy to a more greener, more sustainable place to live and work, helping to meet those carbon commitments rather than kicking the issue down the road. Both Norwich Regeneration Limited and Norwich City Service Limited have loans outstanding with the Council. The NRL loan is associated with losses the company incurred during the first phase of housing development. No matter what Labour councillors say tonight, this money has been lost by the company wholly owned by this council, and lost forever. It is a shame that NRL has had to pay back these losses rather than having more capital at its disposal now. Capital which could help deliver a greater number of energy-efficient homes for the city than is currently planned for. Both these council-owned companies still pose a financial risk to the council moving forward and will remain a focus for the Audit Committee. A new element of the Treasury Management Code requires consideration of the ESG policies in place in future investments. Currently, the Council has placed 2 tranches of £5 million in the Standard Chartered Bank Sustainable Deposit Fund. The Greens have consistently advocated that commercial investment should also bring social, ethical and environmental benefits, and that investment policy should not exclusively focus on security, yield and liquidity. So these 2 investments are to be welcomed. We look forward to seeing more in the future. I conclude this report demonstrates that the Council has performed its duties in reporting the Treasury Management performance for the first 6 months of the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. And on the money time-wise, Councillor Wright, would you like to respond for Dennis?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's fair to say I take perhaps a slightly different approach to Councillor Price in terms of how we'll respond to this. It's been mentioned that there's a duty on all councillors to have an understanding of this report, but I think what is maybe demonstrated as we go through this debate is this isn't the forum for being able to properly scrutinise the Treasury Management. But what is the Treasury Management Committee. And the meeting here a few weeks ago now, where myself, Councillor Kendrick, Councillor Driver and Councillor Price met and discussed Treasury Management as the Treasury Management Committee. That is the forum where we can get into the detail of the issues, where our new Section 151 officer is able to provide answers to the questions that we ask. So I'm very happy with the report that we've got before us today, and will be supporting it, and would like to thank officers for their work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Do any other members wish to speak on this? Councillor Stukeley.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, this is largely an administrative document. I'd like to thank officers for delivering what the council asked them to deliver. And just to address one of the points that Councillor Price made regarding NRL, it is one of the city's success stories now, repaying large parts of its loan. And one of the reasons why we've got an adjustment in this document, and it continues to deliver for the people of Norwich.
Thank you very much. Councillor of course, as a director.
Yes, I should. Yes, I should indeed declare that I'm a director of
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do any other members wish to speak? No? Then I ask Councillor Kendrick to respond.
Yes, I'm afraid I will have to delay this council by actually responding to several of the points that Councillor Price raised. Firstly, as to our cash balances, well, as Councillor Price should know, because he attended the Treasury Management Strategy, this was explained by a very newly appointed Section 151 officer, and why they are the size as they are. As to the issue of the NRL, I do not have any genuine interest in that whatsoever. As has been stated, it's already beginning to pay back, and it's been a real positive for this authority. And yes, of course, there had to be investment in the early years, and they were loans taken out. It hasn't been lost. Those loans have been repaid. I'm sure I think if anyone here was, to be honest with themselves, would have to admit that NRL is a real positive to this city, and it does marvellous work in building a community in Treescore. So I have to disagree. I have to say, at the end of the day, I wish Councillor Price would actually not only attend these Treasury Management boards, but actually listen to what the advice is given. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. We'll now move to a vote. All those who are against, all those who wish to abstain, all those in favour. That's unanimous, thank you very much. We now come to motions. Motion 9A. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As we're all too well aware, voter ID is being introduced for the local elections on 4th of May 2023. The Elections Act 2022, a piece of legislation aimed solely at voter suppression, will require voters to present an approved form of photo ID at a polling station in order to vote. Acceptable ID includes passports, driving licences, older persons' bus passes, and voter authority certificates for those entering without an existing valid ID. It is deeply concerning that the requirement to provide photo ID will present a significant barrier for thousands of residents in Norwich to exercise their right to vote, and these barriers will disproportionately affect ethnic minority, low-income, disabled, LGBT+, and young voters. The acceptable forms of ID listed by the government are weighted towards more affluent and older voters who are more likely to access passports, driving licences, older persons' bus passes, and senior pass cards. Forms of photo ID most likely to be held by younger people, such as young persons' rail cards, have been excluded, and this government should move rapidly to include IDs such as an 18+ bus pass, a young person's rail card, a student ID card, an NUS card, or an 18+ Oyster card. Lifelong voting habits are created when people are young, and as both the council and councillors, we must campaign to ensure that no young person is put off from voting because of this legislation. We are currently in the middle of the Electoral Commission's General Awareness campaign period, and I would like to thank the election officers and comms team here at the Council who have already begun to get the message out, and I know that there will be more to come via council tax bills and the Citizen magazine. But it is telling how many people are not yet aware. I was speaking with a resident on Saturday Someone I know is engaged with events going on around them, and the first they heard about this change was our local newsletter. The scale of the challenge of getting the message out, particularly to young people, should not be underestimated. The Council is working with voluntary and charity groups to brief their service users, and will work with the housing and tenancy teams. But this leaves a massive gap when engaging with young people who don't regularly communicate with the Council or access our services. All of this work is being undertaken when there is little evidence that voter fraud is a systematic issue in UK elections. In the 2019 general, local, European and mayoral elections, only 4 convictions resulted from allegations of in-person voter fraud out of 58 million votes cast. In the 2021 local elections, just 1 caution for election fraud was issued by the police. In his letter to returning officers last week, the Minister raised the fact that voter ID has already been used in Northern Ireland, where this has been in place due to the need of the issues there, and also citing that this is being practiced in many of our European neighbours. Oh, the irony of a Eurosceptic government looking across the channel for justification. I do wonder if some of our MPs actually understand the mechanics of elections and how difficult fraud actually is. An EDP article from December last year quotes Duncan Baker, a Tory MP for North Norfolk, as saying, "We know that even in places as close to North Norfolk as Norwich, in houses of multiple occupancy, people have been going down and voting multiple times with voting cards that are left in communal areas." I hope that if Mr Baker had evidence of a crime taking place, that he reported it to the police. But let's look at an example of how this fraud might work. A person takes the card from the house where they live in order to go and vote on behalf of the other person. Their address means that they have one polling station to go to, staffed by the same presiding officer. So they vote for themselves, and then they have to rely on not being recognised when returning later in the day to vote as the other person. Hat and false moustache, maybe. My experience of our presiding officers is that they are very on the ball and will spot this immediately. But even if they didn't, does this potential theoretical risk really justify the £180 million being spent on rolling out this system over the next decade? Money that can be much better spent elsewhere in supporting the most vulnerable in our society. Far more worrying is the actual election fraud that happened locally, committed by the Norwich Conservative agent in May 2018, who falsified signatures on nomination papers, causing distress and taking up police and magistrate time. In September 22, the Electoral Commission advised the government that the new rules could not be delivered in a way that's fully secure, accessible and workable, pointing out that 7.5% of voters do not currently have an acceptable form of ID, and over 1,000 voters were denied the opportunity to vote during voter ID trials in 2018 and 2019 local elections. To me, denying the opportunity to vote is unacceptable, something I'm sure members here can agree with, and I hope you're able to support this resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I call on Councillor Schmier to second the item.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you very much to Councillor Wright for his sort of tour de force of the problems proposed by this 2022 Act. I'd like to talk about British parliamentary democracy, and it is often used, and not unjustifiably so, as a sort of yardstick for other electoral models. It does, of course, have its faults, as we've discussed and debated in this chamber. We use an antiquated first-past-the-post electoral system, we have an unelected second chamber, and we still don't have suffrage for 16 or 17-year-olds. And we also cling to the old vestiges of our forebears by voting in polling booths on Thursdays. But I don't want to subscribe to some Whiggish school of thought here, but generally the movement has been very positive, because over the centuries and decades we have seen growing emancipation, and in this point I'd like to pay credit to all the Chartists and suffragettes who have ensured that we all here have a vote. In 1832 the Great Reform Acts abolished rotten boroughs, gave representation to the cities, gave the vote to male, small landowners and other farmers, shopkeepers, etc. This was followed in 1867 by the Land Reform Act, which enfranchised more of the male electorate to the extent that all male heads of household could vote by 1868. In 1918, women over 30 finally got the vote, and in 1928 at last they were granted the same rights as men. And more recently, in 1969 with the Representation of the People's Act, the voting age was reduced to 16. The reason why I mention these various acts is because there has been a trend towards greater suffrage in the UK. But for the first time, this seems to be deliberately being undermined and actively reversed. The scale of the danger of this requirement to have ID when voting cannot, and I stress this, cannot be underestimated. And I fear that the 2022 Act can be more appropriately described as little short of a great disenfranchisement act. And that's because research by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has shown that the requirement to provide ID will directly disenfranchise many low-income voters. Furthermore, getting special voter IDs is harder for those who work irregular hours or who may not speak good English or know not how to use the technology. The imposition and the necessity to use IDs for people who vote on the day but not for postal voters is a shameful example of deliberate gerrymandering, and I urge you to vote for this motion to show the strength of opposition to the 2022 Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Schreier. I now invite the group spokespersons to speak. Councillor Kendrick, do you want to speak?
It's me again. I will be brief because I think there's only a certain amount of good that the self-righteous all preaching to each other can do, given that the government simply will not listen. But I do commend the two speeches that we have just heard. I think Councillor Wright is absolutely right, correct in saying that this is a problem that is almost minuscule. You know, if you just imagine if the government paid just as much attention to making sure there wasn't a single fraudulent tax claim, or ministers didn't accidentally forget to pay all their full tax. And of course, as we know, the Chief Executive of Manchester's Revenues and Customs pointed out that no one who innocently makes an error is ever given a penalty, but it still took several weeks to force a government minister out. And also, Councillor Smith gave us an excellent history lesson, and he's absolutely right to praise the Chartists and the suffragettes, but also remember that the 1867 Reform Act was passed by the Conservatives and their Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. And the 1928 extension of the suffrage to all women was passed by Stanley Baldwin and the Conservative Party. What a shower they are now today. But, you know, they've taken this out from the playbook of the Southern Republicans in the United States. As we saw at the recent congressional elections, places like Georgia is rebounded. People, especially the African American community, did not wish to return to the Jim Crow days where they were excluded from voting. And I think that hopefully those groups that are meant to be excluded, they are the young, the poor and ethnic minorities, will instead come out and show their displeasure by voting in ever-increasing numbers. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor, sorry, any other members wish to speak on this?
Yeah, I do.
Please go ahead, Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. But we see a pattern, don't we? Voter suppression is just one strand of the diminishing of our civil liberties. There is legislation being fast-tracked through Parliament to remove the right to strike. We've had punitive legislation relating to the right to protest. And we've had, over 12 or 13 years, the stripping away of a whole range of social and economic rights. So voter suppression is just one strand of a multi-strand attack on the rights of the citizen. When the Brexiteers talked about taking back control, they actually meant take back control, that small elite who don't pay their taxes, who are connected to right-wing newspapers, who are protected by a range of vested interests. That was what they meant by taking back control, and we see that being rolled out, and we will see that when we come to the elections in May.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. Any other members wish to speak? In which case, I'll return. Councillor Wright, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Shamira for his seconding the motion, and both Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Waters for their comments. I think I'll just finish with just picking up on a point that Councillor Waters has made. You know, with all these other rights being taken away from us, the one thing that we can do, the one thing we still have available to us is to go out and vote. And so all of us in our communities need to be making sure, however it is achieved, that we make sure people have the necessary ability to go and vote on the 4th of May and keep voting throughout their life. Because if we want to bring about change, it can and should be at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. We will now move to the vote. All those who are against this motion? All those who wish to abstain on this motion? All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. We're moving now to motion 9B. Forced prepayment meters. Councillor Galvin, would you like to move this motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I would. So first I asked the council how many of our tenants had prepayment meters last April. When a resident told me how her elderly parents, council tenants, were paying a higher tariff as they had one. I found out that we didn't know how many had them. They then spent the summer really scared of the winter, actually, and feeding their meter card to fill it up in preparation until they were told that they were not allowed to add any more cash. So they've got all their money stuck on their meter card. In what other area, I asked myself, do you pay more when you pay in advance? I wondered if I then went back and asked again if we knew how many, if we had any way of finding out how many tenants had them and what our plans to help were. We still don't know, I don't think, but we did step in with the government grant and gave it out to as many as applied and did many other things to help tenants, of which I'm proud that we've done as a council. But as the energy costs have soared, the situation has become much worse and meters are increasingly being forced on people. They're really becoming a monster under the stairs, and many people stuck with feeding them in their homes, and even more frightening if they're imposed, as we know that at least 25 have been up to October, but potentially a lot more because they can be switched over automatically. 4.5 million people in the UK have prepaid meters. They can be the smart type or the old type, and government figures show at least 7,642 in Norwich. That was in 2019, and that doesn't include smart meters, which can operate in prepayment mode. So that will sizably increase that number. Probably, as we have got 14,500 council homes, we know that around half of social housing tenants are likely to have prepayment meters, so we can make a good deduction that we have a lot of people. And the problems with that is it's more expensive than direct debit. It can be around £200 more over winter, possibly more now. In the 6 months up to last April, about 600,000 people were forced onto it. And the problem is it's being used to kind of negotiate rather forcibly with customers that can't afford to pay. So it can be forced onto people by forced installation, by a court order through a warrant of entry, and people can come home and actually find people in their homes changing their meter over, or even having had it changed over when they've been out. It's possible if your landlord allows entry. So hundreds of these, you may have heard, are being signed in minutes by some magistrates, 370,000 since November 21, about 30,000 a month. There's no right of appeal, no risk assessment, and we know that there are those 25 homes that that's happened to in Norwich, but there may have been more, they may have been signed through in other courts. So part of this motion asks us to have a look at that, to write to the magistrates and ask them what kind of risk assessment they carried out before signing those warrants. There's evidence that the energy companies are using this to claw back their costs from other arrears. And these are companies that, as you know, are making huge, enormous profits at the moment. 3 million people in the last year, more than the last decade combined, couldn't afford to top up at some point their meter, which is bad enough if you don't have the energy, but it has really a significant knock-on effects on health and people's lives. Being cold causes ill health, makes ill health worse, makes mental health worse, has impacts on education. And the people that suffer from this, about 65% of the people who moved on to one for debt reasons are disabled or have a long-term health condition, exacerbating existing problems, and 40% are single people with children. People with health conditions often need to have their electricity on for various breathing apparatus and things like that, so they actually have to really make that tough choice to only spend the money on the energy and not on other things. So, yeah, I'd like to wrap up just saying citizens' advice have been very helpful, and they said they've seen the doubling of the need for energy advice in Norwich this year, and that increase is accelerating. There isn't a plateau to it. They say people are coming off deals and the bills are going up, budgets are going down, and figures show across the east of England 13% of people with meters are facing disconnection once a week or more. So that's a rolling thing that happens, and that's the highest of all regions. So they say they're very concerned that more and more clients are falling into deficit budgets at the end of the plan support in March 2023 needs urgently consideration from the government. So I'm also really grateful to the End Fuel Poverty Coalition that have helped with evidence and information for this motion, and I particularly thank the administration for not amending it actually and keeping it as a whole piece, because it was carefully thought through. We were one of the first councils to debate this, and I think we should be proud of that, and I hope we can come to actually take these actions and carry them through, because they are all carefully thought through to have as much of an impact as we can have, and I think we are in an emergency situation, so we need to expedite that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Hayes, would you like to second this item?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When I researched this, I came to the conclusion that fitting prepayment meters with these warrants without will of the householders is essentially discriminatory. Because if you look at the figures show, people are overwhelmingly disabled who are having this happen to them. There's a high group of single parents. These are people who sometimes cannot physically top up their meters, and that's in direct contradiction to the rules. So we know energy companies are directly breaking their own rules by fitting these, and that's a sign something needs to be done. We also know, the government acknowledged in a recent report, that many energy suppliers aren't even managing to give the £400 support they're supposed to be giving. And there's been a very wet sort of response of, oh, we need to encourage them to try harder. Well, no, action needs to be taken against these energy companies. When you look at the statements energy companies have put out about this scandal, about the fact that people are being charged far more than they can afford for their energy, far more than they would be charged on any other form of payment, they say, oh, well, if we don't do this, all the rest of you will have to pay for this in your energy bills, and that's just driving divisions between groups of people who are all stretched by now. All of us are feeling the bite on our energy bills, and actually they have the profits to do this. And it also doesn't acknowledge the fact that making these people pay the higher rates means they're more likely to even be unable to afford that, pushes people further into debt. The customers who are being pushed onto these, as we've said, are more likely to be vulnerable people. It also pushes knock-on effects to us as the City Council. If our vulnerable tenants in council housing properties are having to choose between paying rent and heating, they may choose to pay for the heating if that's what keeps their essential equipment on, if that's what keeps their children warm overnight. And then that's a knock-on effect onto the councils, which is an impetus, a slightly selfish impetus, but an impetus nonetheless for us to deal with this problem ourselves. I'm sure that everybody here tonight will be more than happy to support this motion, however. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gates. Right, my group spokespersons, Councillor Hampton for Labour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Gowan and Hayes for bringing this forward and for such a strong introduction to this important topic. Recently released research by Citizen Advice has indicated that 3.2 million prepayment meter users last year ran out of credit because they simply couldn't afford to top up. That's equivalent to someone getting disconnected once every 10 seconds. We need an immediate end to the forced installation of prepayment meters to halt this wave of blackouts by the back door. So it's a really important issue, and on that basis we'll certainly be supporting this tonight. But during the course of this response I will do a bit more to highlight some of the support we are already offering as a council, address a few points, and also a bit of support we offer more widely to those struggling with the cost of living crisis, which often is going to disproportionately be prepayment meter users. So just on the point of knowing how many of our tenants are prepayment meter users, that can be very challenging for us to find out, because this is done, this is something enacted between customers and the energy companies, and so as you've highlighted, to all of the customers don't really have a say in what's going on either, and it's an issue for our tenants, but it's also an issue more widely across 10 years, so the support we should be offering is and has to be wider reaching. In terms of action so far, as mentioned, we had introduced a discretionary energy rebate scheme to provide some of our most vulnerable residents with help towards their energy bills. The majority of payments went out to eligible residents automatically, including those council tax reduction and in certain vulnerable groups, again some of whom will have been on meters. But we also have the option for those who don't strictly meet these criteria but do have a prepayment meter to apply and benefit from this payment as well. We're always strengthening and adapting the support we offer as the cost of living crisis exacerbates and more people fall into debt. And as the landscape of external help on offer, given how bad things have been getting, that develops as well. For example, we now have a pay zone top-up terminal installed at City Hall, which can provide emergency top-ups by referral directly to prepayment cards and keys. We can also issue food vouchers, which tenants can offset to help meet energy costs and remove the need to choose between heating and eating at the time that they come to us. The direct and targeted support we offer and will continue to offer is vital, but wider long-term action locally and nationally to help people afford their bills is a top priority for us. This work, council, largely falls into two categories. Firstly, improving the energy efficiency of our council homes and enabling improvements to private homes on a worst first basis too. And secondly, increasing household income. And actually I've already had the chance to discuss with this tonight thanks to Councillor Driver's questions, so that saved me a bit of time here. And back to the specifics of this motion, it references EDM, Early Day Motion 690, on involuntary installation of prepayment meters, which was tabled by Labour MP Dan Carlin, and I know that Clive Lewis, as Labour MP for Norwich South, has signed this motion. I'm not sure whether Chloe Smith, now the Tory MP for Norwich North, will join him, but we're obviously still more than happy to write that letter. Clive is also a member of the APPG, or Party Parliamentary Group on Energy Efficiency and Fuel Poverty, and as such has joined in the activity of that group of cross-party MPs in lobbying Grant Shapps, the Energy Secretary of State, for many of the asks in this motion as well. And indeed, Grant Shapps has in the past week or so acknowledged some of the issues around prepayment meters, but still shows no sign of doing anything meaningful about it, which if anything makes what he's saying worse, not better. The government aren't going to do anything substantial or lasting to solve this crisis. So we need a change of government. It means a Labour government, and a Labour government who would launch a publicly owned renewable energy company, implement a national retrofit strategy, and make Britain a clean energy superpower by 2030. And I don't want to preempt any discussion on the Energy for All bill motion that we've tabled tonight, and probably won't get to, but we've got ideas on this side of the chamber about how to go that bit further and truly deliver energy security for all. So again, thank you very much for bringing this motion forward, and we're happy to support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hampton. Councillor Blackwood would like to speak on behalf of the Lib Dems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As temperatures fall this winter, energy companies continue to force customers onto more expensive prepayment meters, adding even more pressure to those already struggling to keep the lights on and their houses warm during this cost of living crisis. Citizens' Advice says it saw more people who were unable to top up their prepayment meter last year than in the whole of the last 10 years combined. We've already heard the figures from Councillor Hampton. 1 in 5 households that include someone who was disabled or long-term sick, which ran out of credit, went on to spend 2 days or more without an energy supply. PPMs can leave struggling households with no choice but to disconnect their electricity or gas. With bills rising at a rapid rate, paying for energy in real time means customers' payments are heaviest in the coldest months and cannot be spread out across the year. Customers can find themselves still having to pay the standing charge even when their supply is off. Their meters can be used by suppliers to collect debt, with amounts owed deducted from each top-up, leaving them with less money to spend on current needs. As we've already heard, suppliers and debt agents acting on their behalf can force them onto a PPM by getting voluntary report. One unintended consequence of smart meters installed in homes is that they can be flipped remotely to PPMs without the need for a warrant, although I gather that Ofgem has acted or is acting to stop this. Particularly in this cost of living crisis, it can't be right for those on prepayment meters to pay more for their energy. It would be interesting to know, I don't know if this is possible, how much interest energy companies earn from money that's loaded up front onto prepayment meters before it's expended on electricity and energy. Energy companies are to be investigated by Ofgem following the sharp increase of people forced onto PPMs. However, this is a slow process, and it's not enough to say, as one government minister did recently, that he would expect that the volume of prepayment meter installations and disconnecting households will start to subside over the coming months. Clearly not enough. Literally cold comfort for the thousands of people facing bailiffs and finding themselves disconnected and with winter deaths up by 20% this winter. It's time for emergency action. During an urgent question last week, Minister Graham Stewart refused to back Vera Hobhouse, MP for Bath's bill to temporarily ban PPMs from being installed this winter and protect the poorest from these higher costs. He said they were looking at the issues raised, but gave no commitment to a timetable or any action from the government. I believe the time has come to look at the system in other countries, whereby nobody can forcibly have their energy cut off, with a minimum amount of power supplied to all households. Years ago, this country agreed that it would no longer be lawful to deny any human being access to water. We've now reached the point where, similarly, everyone should be entitled in all cases to light and to warmth. With people across the country enduring one of the most difficult winters in living memory, householders worried about how they'll keep their heating and lights on, it's not enough for the government to express regret, write letters and have meetings. No one should be paying a premium for their poverty. We fully support all aspects of this motion. Thank you.
Do any other members wish to speak on this motion? I think I saw. Okay. Who's going to be first, Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, this is something I think as councillors we're all dealing with a lot at the moment. One of the other ways that people are being pushed onto prepayment meters is when they're attempting to set up accounts when they've recently moved into properties, and if they're digitally excluded, they simply can't get through to the energy companies on the telephone. So they're being sent out estimated bills in the name of the occupier, and then they're applying to court for warrants for a bill that nobody is actually liable for because nobody's answered the phone to set up an account with them. I'm dealing with one person at the moment who's had 4 suicide attempts over this. It's taken 206 phone calls to finally get through to the energy companies. This is not a one-off phenomenon. People who are digitally excluded are also, through no fault of their own, but people who are offering to pay but have no way of paying because there's no account and no direct debit and nothing to pay into, are also having warrants going to court that are in no name. It's just a terrible situation, and often we need to get our hand on it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stingley.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to support this motion, and as Councillor Davis has said, we're increasingly hearing from people struggling to top up their meters or with other problems where they need our support, and the underhand tactics of the energy companies that are forcing people to overpay or go to court. And this does link in, as others have said, to the Energy for All campaign that we may not get to see this month, but it's essentially part of a reset and a different system that's required across the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lewis, sorry about that, but go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I mean, when I was at university, did have one of these prepayment meters, and there was nothing worse than sort of halfway through a shower, the water stopping, the lights going out, and then having to sort of soap sudded up, have to find your way out and get dressed and go and buy some more credit. That is obviously the lighter side of this issue, because it is a poignant and, as we've heard, heart-wrenching one that can have devastating effects on individuals and households. And the idea that heating or eating, that we sometimes hear from, I fear, Conservative MPs, is some kind of urban myth, needs to be dispelled. It is a very, very real, very, very stark dilemma that is facing families in Norwich and elsewhere right now, as we speak. And there is also a bigger, I suppose, issue, and that is the tragedy on a societal and human level, and is shown by the health inequalities in this country, which remain oh so stark. I think I've used this example before. There is a train line in Glasgow that goes from the West End to the East End. Every stop on it, if you are born in the West End, you lose 4 years of your life if you move to the East End. Basically, there is a 20-year difference between people being born in the richest part of a city and the poorest, despite the fact that there are mere 2.5 miles in between, I believe. And if you think that's just a Scottish phenomenon, well, in London, it's much the same. On a stop on I think it's the Docklands Light Railway on Star Lane, the life expectancy is also about 20 years lower than in Oxford Circus in the West End. The tragedy is that the poor are being hammered and hammered and hammered again, and this is yet another example of that. So I am absolutely delighted that we are doing what we can in this motion, and indeed the one which we may, as we've heard, may not be debated. But we are sending a message. We are trying to resolve those fundamental iniquities in our society that are causing so much suffering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, is there anybody else wish to speak? Any of the members? Councillor Mike Sands, please go ahead.
A couple of brief comments, if I may. I'll just turn back to my notes. There was an article in The Guardian just last week which pointed out that while people who are paying their energy by direct debit, they have this energy subsidy drop into their accounts automatically. Those people on prepaid meters have to apply for it. Again, that's another indication of inequality. People may remember this, a number of years ago now, Channel 4 had that infamous programme about Benefit Street. It's a great pity that Channel 4 doesn't have another programme now about tax avoidance and tax evaders boulevard. I think if people's eyes were open up to that, we would have a different set of situations. The current situation is absolutely deplorable that people are having to make a choice between heating and eating, and quite often they're going without both. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mike Sands. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Peake, please go ahead.
It's about prepayment electric meters. We moved to our property and there's one already in there, and the gas electric people wouldn't take it away. But then they were topping it up with the government's pay, for topping up your heating, and I went to the electric prepayment meter. The last one they sent was they had to take it to the post office to top it up. But we've been topping up all summer for the winter, and it says you've got more than £180 in there, you won't be able to top it up. So they sent us the government sent us, we can't top up our meter with it. So it's really unfair for having this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peake. Any other members wish to speak on this? Okay, then I invite Councillor Gall to respond.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your points. So yeah, I'm really glad we're all agreed and that we can move forward. We could see this coming in terms of the prices going up and people being on meters. I think we do need to translate it into action now. And the fourth point on the motions is make extra attempts to ascertain which city council tenants have prepayment meters, especially those who might be at extra risk of being cut off, and monitor them to offer assistance, for example, through housing officer and other support. So I'm very glad we're going to be doing that, and I had some advice that we can ask Ofgem if we haven't already. BASE has managed to identify all meter points that are electric, so we should be able to, with Ofgem and BASE support, actually provide that information. We need to ask them for it, but they should be able to get it to us. So hopefully we might be able to move forward on this and be in a position where we do know basically who's got them. Obviously we won't know all the private residences, but we can put that in our communications, and we'll know at least that we've done what we can, and the writing to government and the pressure needs to carry on. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor Galpin. We now move to the vote. All those who are against this motion? All those who wish to excuse me, please. Abstain? And all those in favour? That's another unanimous one, thank you. Now, we've reached the dreaded point. I'm going to read you a form of words, which I'm required to do. I'm required to ask if any of the remaining items can be taken as unopposed business. If they are opposed, we'll have a short break and then we'll go to those businesses. Go ahead, please, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Due to the lateness of the hour, the temperature in the room, the issues of substance that we would want to be fresh and focused on in discussion, I propose that we withdraw the following motions: 9D, 9E, 9F, 9G, because there is not any motions at the Budget Council, to take these in that order to the March Council meeting.
Thank you very much. Yes, so that needs to be seconded and voted. Thank you. So, all those in favour? Thank you. So that leaves motion 9C. So we're going to have that short break.
No, I think 9C to include 9C as well. All the remaining motions.
The public have been waiting to hear this, yes. Councillors. I think we should debate this.
We are going to.
No, Lord Mayor, my intention was all the remaining motions, and I should have mentioned 9C as well.
Seconded.
I think, shall we take this short break, and I'm happy to meet the leaders in the park.
You've got a motion to the point, you should
go straight to the vote.
Okay.
Seconded.
Let me take 2 minutes.
We'll spend 2.5 hours waiting for this.
Yes, just a moment. and this is permitted in the Constitution. We can vote to withdraw all motions. So can we more formally, just so we're clear, Councillor, what you're proposing that?
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, go ahead.
When you say withdraw motions, I'm assuming that councillors who haven't proposed a motion can't withdraw that motion.
So what's your point of order? This is
Yes, I think I understand the point you're making. Well, that's the wording, and it was a motion that they are all withdrawn, which means they would come to the March meeting. That is the proposal as I understand it. Is that the case, Councillor Waters?
Well, it is indeed, and I am following the guidance in the Constitution, and I've given reasons why I think they should come for a full and proper debate. I would also say that perhaps we do need to meet as group leaders to think about how many questions we put on the agenda at the front of the meeting, so we have more space for a timely consideration of motions to council. It's hardly a filibuster, I'm speaking extremely briefly. A filibuster would mean we'd be going on till midnight.
No, we won't. Right, we have a motion before us, it's been proposed.
Under what part of the Constitution, sorry?
Could you read it out?
Okay.
Does it have to be worded as a deferral rather than a withdrawal for it to be? Because I think, as the chair of the Constitution Working Party, I thought we could only proposers could withdraw a motion, but that anybody could move to defer.
I think.
Not to put words into council's mouth.
I will feed that back. Are you happy to change that to a deferral, Councillor Waters?
Well, actually, the practical outcome is exactly the same, because these are therefore deferred. And I made that clear when I made the initial point.
Okay.
So that's the March meeting.
That's clarified then. So we've got that.
Can we have the monitoring officer confirm this, please?
So, yes, of course you can, because I consulted them.
So, paragraph 72 of the Constitution, motions without notice. The following motions may be moved without notice and will move to the vote without debates. And section D of that says to withdraw a motion. Therefore, a motion can be withdrawn when it's moved to do so, and then we'll move to the vote.
Is your interpretation of that withdrawal would need a proposal? So if only the proposer can withdraw a motion,
No,
that's my understanding.
No,
the council.
no, that's quite clear from that. I don't think there's an intention to stifle the debate here, simply that it will come up next time. And we've got a proposal which has been seconded, and we will move to a vote. All those in favour of that?
Okay. Chair.
We voted.
We're voting.
You're going home. You've got it in the bag.
Councillor Price, please. Thank you. I'm sorry, we voted before this point of order was raised. So we're having this vote. Can you keep your hands clearly up so that I can see them? So 17. All those who wish
Sorry. It's a shame when there are members of the public that have sat there all evening.
All those who wish to abstain. All those who wish to abstain, please vote. All those who are against this motion.
Against this motion to stop.
We're still.
Yes.
We're still not actually clear. We're still actually clear whether it's actually allowable, because
we have voted. The Chamber has voted, and those motions are withdrawn with the change. They come to the March meeting, and I call this meeting, I declare this meeting over. Thank you very much indeed.